This episode of the Burnout Recovery Podcast is brought to you by MEGA, your medical indemnity partner. Whether you're starting out in your career or have decades of experience, MEGA helps you thrive with support that goes beyond insurance. Enjoy travel benefits like complimentary travel insurance and Qantas points on your membership, plus education, medico-legal support, access to career coaching and wellbeing resources. Visit mega.com.au to learn more. Insurance issued by Medical Insurance Australia, which has not taken into account your objectives or situation. Before you make any decisions about our policies, please read our PDS and consider your needs. Call us for a copy or visit mega.com.au.
Welcome to the Burnout Recovery Podcast, a guiding resource dedicated to healthcare professionals on their journey to overcoming burnout. Spearheaded by Dr Jo Braid, a certified professional coach and rehabilitation physician.
Hello and welcome back to the Burnout Recovery Podcast. I'm Dr Jo Braid, your host, and this is episode number 196. If this is your first time listening to the podcast, wishing you a very warm welcome. Today, I want to talk about something that trips up a lot of well-meaning advice in this space, including some of my own. We hand out a recovery strategy, a boundary tool, a framework, and it works beautifully for one person and lands completely flat for the next. Same tool, same room, maybe same department, maybe same location, different outcome. So today we're talking about why recovery isn't a one-size-fits-all and what actually determines whether a strategy sticks for you and how to stop assuming that because something worked for your colleague, it should work for you too. I was running a workshop last month for a room of physiotherapists and occupational therapists in private practice. A great group, really engaged, the kind of room where people voluntarily put their hands up. And one of the managers in the room, who was also a lead clinician, said they were struggling to protect any focus time. Clinical notes, doing their letters, supervision prepped, strategy planning, all of it getting squeezed into the gaps between patients or spilling over into the evenings. Sound familiar? So I opened it up to the room. What could they actually try to get that focus time within working hours, within the workplace? And the suggestions came thick and fast. Close the door, put up a sign, use noise-cancelling headphones, block it out in your diary. And I added one myself. Put on Do Not Disturb on your phone. Now, every single one of those ideas is a perfectly good strategy. But here's what struck me by watching the room. Some people were nodding at the sign idea, and they looked a bit unconvinced by the headphones. Others lit up at the Do Not Disturb suggestion and looked faintly horrified at the idea of a closed door with a sign on it, like that felt too confronting, too visible. Same problem, same room, same team, completely different reactions to the same list of tools. This is really the heart of today's episode. A closed door works if you're someone who's comfortable being visibly unavailable. A sign works if you don't mind the slightly public statement of it. Headphones work if you want the boundary without the conversation. Do Not Disturb on the phone works if your interruptions mostly come from a screen, not from someone physically appearing at your desk. Now, none of these are the correct answer. They're just different answers, a combination suited to different people, different roles, even different nervous systems. And I think we do people a disservice in this space when we hand over one framework and expect it to fit everyone in the room. So let's look at why this happens, because there's good reasoning behind it, not just personal preference. The first piece comes from research on personality and behavior change, specifically work coming out of the field of implementation science. What this research consistently shows is that adherence to any strategy, health, productivity, or otherwise, is far higher when the strategy matches a person's existing tendencies rather than fighting against them. In plain language, if a tool asks you to behave in a way that's fundamentally uncomfortable for your temperament, you'll use it a handful of times, then quietly stop. And that's not a willpower failure. That's a real mismatch. The second piece is about occupational context. If you're academic, your recovery pressures often center around autonomy and unstructured time, the tyranny of the open calendar, and the guilt of not producing. If you're clinical, your pressures tend to be relentless, externally placed demand, other people's emergencies dictating your day. And if you're running a business, the pressure is often decision fatigue and the sense that if you stop, everything stops. 3 really different burnout profiles. This relates to an episode I did a few weeks back. And 3 very different starting points for what recovery needs to look like. And the third piece is genuinely one of my favorites, and it comes from stress neuroscience. Dr. Amy Arnsten's work at Yale, which longtime listeners will have heard me reference before, shows that under chronic stress, we default to our most well-worn neural pathways, the tools and behaviors that already feel familiar and safe, which means the recovery strategy that asks you to do something completely foreign to your personality is fighting your own stressed brain on 2 fronts at once. Not just building a new habit, but building it in exactly the conditions where your brain is most resistant to anything unfamiliar. So when a strategy doesn't stick, it's rarely because you're not disciplined enough. It's more likely because nobody asked whether it actually fits you in the first place. So let's get practical, and I want to run this through the 4 pillars, but with a twist. Instead of giving you 1 tool per pillar, I want to give you a way of choosing which version of the tool is actually yours. So, with mindset, start by dropping the idea that there's a gold standard recovery strategy you're failing to stick to. Replace it with a single question. Does this fit how I actually operate? Or am I trying to force myself into someone else's system? That question alone will save you months of strategies that were never going to work. And I invite you to sit with that this week, particularly if there's a tool you've tried and abandoned more than once. It might not be you. It might just be the wrong tool. Support. This is where knowing your own profile matters the most. If you're someone who processes out loud, your support strategy might be a weekly conversation with a peer, not a journal. If you're someone who needs to think before you speak, it might be the opposite, with a written reflection before you bring anything to a colleague. Academic types in my audience, your support often needs to be structured and scheduled because unstructured support competes with unstructured time and loses. Clinical types, you may need support that's available in the moment, not booked 3 weeks out, because your pressure often arrives without warning. Movement, same principle. Some people recover through solitary movement, a run, a swim, time that's genuinely theirs. Others recover through movement that's social, a game, a class, tennis with a friend where the conversation matters as much as the exercise. And I'll put my hand up here. Tennis absolutely does that for me. It's movement and connection in the same hour, and that combination works for my particular wiring. It might not be yours, and that's fine. And finally, sleep. Business owners and leaders in particular, your sleep disruption often comes from decision fatigue and the sense that stopping means something will fall over. So your sleep strategy might need to start earlier in the day, a genuine handover point where you decide what's done for today rather than a bedtime routine alone. Clinicians, yours is more often disrupted by rumination about a case or an interaction. Ask me how I know. Your sleep tool might need to be a specific processing practice before bed, not just a wind-down routine borrowed from someone else's evening. And back to that workshop room. The strategy that will actually work for that lead clinician isn't isn't the one I'd choose or the one their colleagues suggested. It's the one that matches how they've arrived to protect their time. For some of you listening, that's a closed door and a sign. For others of you, it's do not disturb on the phone and nothing more visible than that. Both are valid and neither is more disciplined than the other. And that brings me to the phase that I keep coming back to on this podcast. No is a full sentence, but how you say no and what version of that boundary actually fits you, that's allowed to look different for every single person listening today. Here are 3 reflection questions for you this week. What recovery strategy have I tried and abandoned more than once? And was it actually wrong for me or just wrong for my personality? Which of the 4 pillars, mindset, support, movement, sleep, tends to work best when I choose my own version rather than someone else's? And if I designed my recovery approach entirely around how I actually operate, not how I think I should operate, what would change? Your action step this week is to pick one pillar and instead of adopting someone else's tool wholesale, adapt it. Change one element so it actually fits your personality, your role, and your pressures. Small adjustment, but it's often the difference between a strategy you use once and one you use for years. This episode wraps up the High Performers Paradox series in many ways. Strengths and shadows, sustainable performance, your squad, culture, and now recovery that's actually built for you rather than borrowed from someone else. If today's episode landed for you, I'd love you to share it with a colleague who's been trying to force themselves into a recovery routine that was never built for them. And if boundaries are the piece you keep coming back to, I've just released a set of 12 boundary scripts, real language for the moments where you know you should say no, but don't have the words. That's available now with an option to upgrade to a full video masterclass if you want to go deeper. Details are in the show notes. You can find me on Instagram and Facebook at Burnout Recovery Doctor and on LinkedIn. And don't forget, I have my weekly newsletter, The Sunday Long Game, at drjobraid.com/subscribe. Until next week, be human first. Everything else will follow. Ready to take the next step in your burnout recovery journey? Visit drjobraid.com for free resources, all 150 plus podcast episodes, and information about my keynote speaking. Links are in the show notes. Your well-being matters. Protect the asset that is you. Be your best you. Rely on MEGA for your protection and support, serving doctors for over 125 years through insurance, education, medical legal advice, and member benefits designed to help you thrive and succeed. Insurance issued by Medical Insurance Australia, which has not taken into account your objectives or situation. Before you make any decisions about our policies, please read our PDS and consider your needs. Call us for a copy or visit mega.com.au.